It's fall. Time to gear up and get ready at Cabela's Ultimate Outfitter Sale. Save $25 on IMI 223 and 556 bulk ammo. And get 30% off select Muck rubber boots. Take $40 off a Big Game Guardian XL 2-man ladder stand. And $100 to $150 off select Vortex Viper rifle scopes. Plus, order your next firearm online at Cabela's.com and we'll ship it to your nearest Cabela's for free. Come to Cabela's Ultimate Outfitter Sale, in-store and online at Cabela's.com.
Friends, to the third episode of the second season of Heart to Heart with Anna, a show for the congenital heart defect community. Our purpose is to empower members of our community with resources, support, and advocacy information. Today's show is Failure to Thrive, Oral Aversions and Nutrition. What is failure to thrive? According to the Johns Hopkins Children's Center website, children are diagnosed with failure to thrive when their weight or rate of weight gain is significantly below that of other children of similar age and gender. Infants or children who fail to thrive have a height, weight, and head circumference that do not match their growth charts. The person's weight falls lower than third percentile as outlined in standard growth charts, or 20% below the ideal weight for their height. Growing may have slowed or stopped after a previously established growth curve. Failure to thrive can delay or slow physical skills such as rolling over, sitting, standing, and walking, mental and social skills. We know in babies with congenital heart defects that the failure to thrive diagnosis is a symptom of their medical condition. Failure to thrive can also occur when damage to the brain or central nervous system occurs, and this may cause feeding problems in infants. Many of our babies with congenital heart defects may suffer from a brain injury before, during, or after open heart surgery. Failure to thrive can also occur when there are heart or lung problems, which can affect how oxygen and nutrients move through the body. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for our babies born with heart defects to also have lung problems. And for those born with critical congenital heart defects, there are usually major structural problems with the heart. And by definition, this can cause the body's blood to flow through the body differently. Because of this, it seems that having a baby with a congenital heart defect will almost always include a diagnosis of failure to thrive at one point or another. Oral aversion is when a baby is reluctant or refuses to be breastfed or to eat. If a child has been tube-fed for a long time due to their congenital heart defect, it may also cause oral aversion. Therefore, in an effort to encourage weight gain in our congenital heart defect babies, we may have to employ the use of feeding tubes, which may result in oral aversions. The oral aversion may be to certain foods, to certain textures, or to certain consistencies. And this could make getting the proper nutrients in our babies born with congenital heart defects even more difficult. That is why our topic today, Failure to Thrive, Oral Aversions and Nutrition, is so important. To discuss this today, our guests are heart mom Danielle Leppo and pediatric dietitian Kristi King. Danielle Leppo lives in Pennsylvania with her fiancé and daughter Violet. She works part-time in retail, but her number one priority is being mother to her congenital heart defect princess. Violet was born July 2012 with multiple heart defects, one lung, and incomplete heterotaxy syndrome. She has had 2 heart surgeries, a Nissen fundoplication, and a G-tube placed due to aspiration and a failure to thrive diagnosis. She has struggled with gaining weight all of her life. At almost 2 years of age, she is still 80% G-tube fed. In between her 2 heart surgeries, she was unable to eat safely by mouth. This caused oral aversions that she has had to overcome. With the help from a speech therapist since last June, Violet has been able to eat by mouth without gagging and eats a variety of foods now. Her feeding has been a struggle, but I am so happy to say that she has been able to gain weight and to remain healthy. We'll meet Kristi King in the second segment of our show. Danielle, welcome to Heart with Anna.
Thank you for having me today, Anna. Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah. That's okay.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. So briefly about Danielle and her heart defects and when she was labeled failure to thrive.
I sure can. Violet was born July 10th, 2012. 20 weeks into my pregnancy, they diagnosed her with multiple heart defects and heterotaxy. Heterotaxy just basically means the different arrangement, and it typically affects all of the organs in the body, such as the spleen, lungs, and intestines. Violet is actually an even more rare case because she is considered incomplete heterotaxy, as it only affected her heart and lungs. Her heart is actually on the right side of her chest, which is called dextrocardia, and it's flipped backwards, so it's pointing to the opposite direction that a normal heart would. She had 2 large holes in her heart that were surgically closed on May 1st, 2013. Violet also has an underdeveloped right pulmonary artery, which is the main artery leading to the right lung. This, in turn, did not allow her right lung to grow, so it's actually super underdeveloped and does not function at all. Two of her main pulmonary, her right lung is basically the size of a cotton ball, they said, so it doesn't function.
Wow.
Violet had difficulty gaining weight from birth. She nursed, which was a huge step, but she also had to take fortified bottles, and we have to fortify those to 30 calories per ounce, whereas the normal formula is 20 calories per ounce. She would often fall asleep during her eating and would only take an ounce or 2 at a time. And they actually gave her the label of failure to thrive when she was only 2 weeks old, and that was when we went in for cardiology follow-up, and she was only up 10 ounces from her birth weight, but it was actually all fluid from congestive heart failure.
Right. I had a similar situation happen with my son because he wasn't diagnosed right away. Was Violet diagnosed at birth?
No, she was actually diagnosed when I was still pregnant with her, thank goodness.
Oh, okay. So you knew that you were going to have a baby with severe congenital heart problems and lung problems too. So as we can see, given the information I said earlier in the show, it's pretty much it was going to be a no-brainer that eventually she was going to be labeled failure to thrive with all the problems her body had. I mean, it's amazing how many calories our bodies burn with us just breathing and being alive, just functioning.
Yes, exactly.
So
funny you should mention the breathing
kids,
because
it's really bad.
Yeah, her respiration rate was like in the 120s. A normal baby would be 30s to 40s.
Wow. Yeah, so she had tachypnea. So she seemed to be breathing more rapidly than a baby who doesn't have a heart defect. Wow.
Correct.
So she came with quite a load of problems, didn't she?
She did.
And yet she's so gorgeous. I'm so happy you shared some photos of her with me because she is absolutely gorgeous. And, folks, you'll have to go out to my website later, hearttoheartwithanna.com, because we will post some pictures of how beautiful Violet is with her beautiful mother. So that will be a lot of fun to see. Well, Violet gives us hope. Violet gives us hope that even though children can be born with so many heart defects and have so many problems early in life, that they can still turn out just great. They can still do okay. So why don't you tell me about some of the symptoms that Violet exhibited that lets you know she's going to need some extra help with eating?
Actually, the rapid breathing and her not being able to finish off bottles like she should were 2 of the clues that we were just like, okay, we need to get her some help. And with the weight gain issue, that was just making it worse. So we actually took her into the ER August 26, 2012, and they put down a nasogastric tube, which is a feeding tube from her nose to her stomach, to give her more nutrients so she wouldn't burn them off while she was eating. Okay,
so she started with the nasogastric tube, but now she has a G tube.
She does.
And why did they change from the nasogastric tube to the G tube? And for those of you who are listening who may not know, a G tube is actually another surgery that our babies go through, and it's where they put a tube directly into the stomach, right? Is it to the stomach or to the intestines?
Hers is to her stomach.
Right. Okay. So it goes direct. My son didn't have to have one of those, thank heaven. So I don't know as much about that as I probably should. But so this goes directly to the stomach. It is another operation. So poor little thing. She's already been through so much. But the nasogastric tube actually goes into the nose and goes down into the tummy. So that's not quite as as scary a procedure to have to use with the nasogastric tube. But apparently she wasn't getting enough food with the nasogastric tube.
With the nasogastric tube, it actually made her reflux worse, and she ended up aspirating into her lungs.
Ooh.
And the fact that she only had one, they needed to protect that one. So 3 weeks after her first heart surgery, which was September 4th, so basically a week after we took her into the ER, she had her first heart surgery, which was a pulmonary artery band to reduce the blood flow to her lungs, so she wasn't in heart failure anymore. But she also suffered from vocal cord damage from the intubation tube.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It just seemed like one complication after another.
It definitely was. So we opted to go with the Nissen, which just racks the stomach to help prevent reflux and medications coming up from the stomach and going into the lungs. And we did that about 3 weeks after her surgery.
And the Nissen fundoplication, unfortunately, is another procedure that's fairly common with our kids with complex congenital heart defects due to that reflux, because the reflux, as you said, can cause aspiration, which can be very serious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you have been through so much with Violet. What do you think has been the most difficult thing dealing with her oral aversion?
I think the most difficult thing is that we can't feed her like she was a normal child. Say we go out to a restaurant and they ask, does she need a children's menu? Oh, well, no, she doesn't eat. And then the looks that come from that because people don't understand quite as much. So I think that's the most difficult thing.
Well, do you worry about getting the right nutrients into Violet, considering she doesn't take food by mouth like most babies do?
Yes, I definitely worried about that. She was actually on an infant formula until she was about 15 months old before we switched over to what's called a blended diet. The blended diet is real food that I blend up in a blender and also combine it with a high-calorie toddler formula. And she gets a multivitamin now, too, as well. So I think she's a bit more rounded now, more so than what she was before. She actually grew an inch and gained almost a pound just in the first 2 months of doing that blended diet. So I knew it was a no-brainer that this was the right thing for her.
Wow, yes. That seems like that was really a clear sign to you that what you were doing was helping her.
Yes, definitely. And that felt good because sometimes you second-guess yourself. Is that the right decision for my child? And it was, thankfully. So
exactly.
we could not be any more proud.
Absolutely. Well, and it is scary when you're watching your baby and your baby is struggling. You already know they have heart problems, and you think to yourself, what can I do? I was explaining to my son, Alex, when I was talking to him about putting this show together, I said, one of the fundamental things that a mom does is feed her baby. And many of us choose to breastfeed. Was that even an option for you to breastfeed Violet?
It actually was in the beginning. They didn't allow her to eat for the first 3 days of her life because they were making sure her intestines were not malrotated, which is hooked up kind of wrong, and it could potentially be life-threatening. But as soon as we started to even attempt nursing, she took right away. She latched on, but she tired herself out so much, so I was limited to what I could do.
Right. And that was one of the ways that I knew something was wrong with my baby, was that he would latch on, he would nurse for 5 minutes, and then he'd fall asleep. It did just tire him out so much to eat until he had his first surgery. And then after that, he was fine. So even after Violet had her surgery, you weren't able to nurse her, or had you, by that point, realized you had so many other things that you were dealing with that you didn't go back and try?
They made her NPO, so she wasn't allowed to take anything by mouth. So I just pumped and gave my breast milk through her NG tube at that time, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, that's great. So she was able to get your nutrients and to get your antibodies, which is really important. And so how long did you do that?
I pumped until November of 2012, and then after that, I actually relied on donor milk from other moms. So we used that for a couple months, and then we found out that she had a milk protein allergy, so we had to switch to a hyperallergenic formula.
Wow, you have just been through so much with Violet. Well,
yes, that poor kid.
What advice would you give to other parents who are facing a diagnosis of failure to thrive and who have babies with congenital heart defects that are really complex, like Violet's?
My advice is that regardless of the diagnosis, you are doing everything right for your child. You're not a failure, and neither is your child, even though that word is there. There's such a stigma with failure to thrive, and I truly hope that it will go away in the future, and we shouldn't be made to feel like we did something wrong or that we did not provide adequate care for our children, and just know that all your child needs is your love, and they will overcome it.
Oh, I love that. That's so sweet. And that's so true. I almost cried when my son's pediatrician labeled him failure to thrive because I was a special ed teacher. And the only time that we heard that expression was with babies who weren't loved or children who weren't loved. And just like you said, my baby was very much loved, and I couldn't understand how they could attach that label to him. So like you, I would like them to change that diagnosis. Failure.
Yes, definitely.
It's such a negative connotation, and it hurts. It actually gets right at your core, don't you think?
It definitely does.
So I love that you said that, Danielle. I just love that. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing with us. We need to go to a commercial break, but you'll be coming back in our chat session, so I'm looking forward to that. And
yes, me too.
And this has just been so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about Violet. Coming up next, we have a national... Oh, you were wonderful, Danielle. Coming up next, we have a national spokesperson for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics with us. Find out how she helps families dealing with nutritional issues when we return to Heart with Anna.
Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect, or CHD, community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father, and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more. Anna Jaworski has spoken around the world at congenital heart defect events, and she is available as a keynote or guest speaker for your event. Go to hearttoheartwithanna.com to learn more about booking Anna for your event. You can also find out more about the radio program, keep up to date with CHD resources and information about advocacy groups, as well as read Anna's weekly blog. Anna wants you to stay well connected and participate in the CHD community. Visit hearttoheartwithanna.com today.
Welcome back to our show, Heart to Heart with Anna, a show for the congenital heart defect community. Today we are talking with heart mom, Danielle Leppo, and pediatric dietitian, Kristi King, about failure to thrive, oral aversions, and nutrition. We just finished talking with Danielle about her experience with Violet, who was labeled failure to thrive, and dealing with oral aversion and nutrition problems. Now we will turn our attention to Kristi King. Kristi King is a senior pediatric dietitian at Texas Children's Hospital and a clinical instructor at Baylor College of Medicine, providing nutrition counseling to children and their families, specializing in chronic malabsorptive and intestinal conditions. Kristi King was an essential member of the development of Baylor College of Medicine's 2-week nutrition and physical activity-based summer weight loss camp for obese children. She serves as a co-investigator for nutrition research projects, including quality improvement, obesity, and nutrition support. Kristi King is a frequent speaker to health professionals and the public in both local and national settings, and serves as a nutrition expert and advisory board member for many community and health organizations, as well as a media spokesperson for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. She is a graduate of Florida State University and earned a master's degree in public health from the University of Texas. Thank you for coming on the show, Kristi.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're both Longhorns. Hook 'em horns.
Yes, that's right.
And I absolutely love your blog. We will have a link to that on the Heart to Heart Within a website, and that is how I found you. So I want to thank you so much for putting out such an informative blog.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you found it informative.
Well, it was perfect when it came to today's show. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about what we just heard from Danielle, where it doesn't seem like it is uncommon for children with congenital heart defects to suffer that darn label, failure to thrive.
Yes, it does. And, well, I know that that Danielle was talking about how there can be, kind of a negative connotation with the failure to thrive label or diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And there are a group of medical professionals that are actually working on making a true definition of failure to thrive, because that definition can vary based upon different organizations or research articles. So we're working to make it more uniformed and across the board. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that actual failure to thrive is actually tweaked a little bit so that maybe it doesn't sound quite as negative.
Well, that would be awesome.
Yes.
That would be great. So if you can see, it's very painful for a mother to be told your baby's failure to thrive.
It is.
Are there any other terms that we could use that would be better? Can you think of something?
Yeah, it's very hard, even as a healthcare professional, when talking with a family that does have a child who's failure to thrive, because the first thing they think of is automatically, you think I'm not feeding my child. And, we all know that that's not the case. So I haven't quite figured out what kind of terminology I think would be better than that. Growth failure might be a little bit better. Delayed growth, delayed. I don't know. I haven't quite figured that out yet. But it is a very touchy subject. Every time I deal with a patient and I see failure to thrive babies for various medical conditions on a daily basis. So it is very difficult. And I think as a healthcare professional, approaching it in a very soft manner and a very sensitive manner can be helpful to the parents and hope that they don't, feel that way. I know I try to tell my parents when I talk with them that, this happens with medical conditions such as congenital heart, disease. And, that's not anything new. This is part of the package, and we just have to take it and run with it and do what's best for your child. So.
Well, I'm so glad to know that you're sensitive to that, because I don't know if people who are dealing with our kids who are so complex, it's just part of your jargon, and you may not realize for those of us who aren't part of that medical world, that's a jarring diagnosis. It
is, and you become very jaded to medical jargon, and meaning, if one of your friends has a kid who goes into the hospital for, let's say, upper respiratory infection and, they have to be hospitalized for 1 or 2 days, yes, I know a lot of parents will go, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Our thoughts are with you. But when you have a child with complex medical conditions, sometimes you kind of wish that maybe it was just an upper respiratory infection. So you become very jaded to that medical terminology and to those types of things. So I think that as healthcare professionals, we most definitely have to remember that we are dealing with patients and we are dealing with general population that may not have medical education background, and it is still our responsibility to be sensitive to that.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And you're a very young woman. Are you also a mother?
I am not a mom, not yet. Hopefully someday. But I do have godchildren, and I do have some of my other best friends have kids, so I'm around kids all the time and love them like they're my own. So, but hopefully one day.
Well, you just seem very sensitive, and for somebody who hasn't even had a child herself yet, I really appreciate that. So let's talk about infant feeding and breast milk. Most of us are taught that breast milk is best.
Yes.
Now we're taught that. My mother wasn't taught that, and so she was a little bit surprised when I told her I wanted to breastfeed. And then when we had Alex's heart defect diagnosed and I insisted on continuing to breastfeed, my son's pediatric cardiologist was not in favor of that. So from a dietitian or a nutritionist point of view, how do you feel about breast milk and breastfeeding a baby with a congenital heart defect?
Right. So I think that you most definitely have to take each child's case individually. And when it comes to breastfeeding, obviously we like breast milk. We know that breast is best. The really hard thing with breastfeeding is actually not being able to measure how much the child's getting. And so when you're dealing with someone that does have congenital, heart defects, in which we know that their calorie requirements are much higher than a typical child that does not have heart defects, it can be a little frustrating for healthcare providers, to say, oh, well, you can't breastfeed because we can't measure. Can we work around that? Absolutely. Such as Danielle, she pumped and then gave her child, breast milk. If donor milk is available, you most definitely can use donor milk. I know here at Texas Children's, we have our own donor milk bank, and our NICU, we go through it, like you and I would go through water, which is great because that's what our babies really need. Can we concentrate the breast milk? Absolutely. So I think if you want to know exactly how much your child's getting, you can pump and then you can concentrate that formula, concentrate the breast milk with some formula to make it a little bit more higher calorie for the volume that they're getting. And that way we can actually calculate how much the baby's getting. And then on top of that, I usually will still allow the mothers to breastfeed, a couple of times during the day just so that they can have that bonding experience, but not so much to tire the child out, So we do want them to have that bonding experience. So it may be non-nutritive breastfeeding, so they might be put to the breast and they only breastfeed for, 4 or 5 minutes, but at least you're still doing it. So we do try to encourage that as much as we can.
I really like that. That talks or speaks to the need for that mother to have that closeness with her baby without the stress of wondering how much am I putting in. That was the big problem with my son's pediatric cardiologist. He said, how can we measure it? And I was lucky that his nurse was very much pro-breastfeeding and was supporting my decision to continue anyway. But Alex was almost 3 months old by the time he was discharged from the hospital, so we were able to supplement with food after that, and so that really helped him to be able to gain the weight afterwards. So the concentrate, I've never heard of concentrating the breast milk. Is that kind of like adding some thickeners to the breast milk, or are you adding something to it? It's
a little bit different. So if you need higher calorie breast milk, and now if you're at a big hospital, which most kids with congenital heart defects tend to end up in a larger heart center, we can actually analyze mom's breast milk, so we can tell you exactly how many calories per ounce you're producing on average, which is kind of a really cool thing. But what we do is we'll actually add a little bit of formula powder to the breast milk that you're going to give your baby. So that way, on average, breast milk is about 19 calories per ounce. And so we can actually add some powdered formula to it to make it all the way up to 30 calories per ounce, like Danielle was doing with Violet. So I think that, that's definitely a great tool that we have in our back pocket that we can use to help get your child the great nutrients from breast milk, but also give them the calories that they need. And then as far as thickeners go, It's not recommended to use thickeners in babies less than 6 months old, and if they are a premature infant, less than 1 year of age. And this recently came out about a year and a half ago. And so we try to stick to that as much as possible. So if we find that a baby does need something to help thicken the breast milk, or if they're on formula for whatever reason to help thicken the formula, we'll actually use pulverized rice cereal. So we'll have moms or dads put rice cereal kind of in a food processor or blender and pulverize it to where it makes it a real fine powder, and then that's what we actually use to thicken the breast milk or the formula.
Well, what you say completely confirms what Marie Biancuzzo reported when I went on her show, actually, that talked about breast milk. And she was saying the exact same thing, that she didn't think that the thickeners were necessarily a good idea, but that other ways that you could get the calories into the babies. So It's good to know that there's consensus among the professionals. Okay, so for children with congenital heart defects who are older and dealing with taste or texture issues, can you tell us some ways to help our children try a more varied diet?
Yes. So I think that this is probably the number one question that I get. And it can be very frustrating when you're trying to deal with a child who may have oral aversions, and you're trying to get them to take more of a variety diet. One of the things that I really emphasize is letting your child explore the food that you're asking them to eat. So let them touch it. Let them play with it. It's going to get messy. Let them smell it. And because, like you and I as adults, we don't really normally eat something that we haven't really smelled or looked at or poked our fork at, like you kind of want to know what it is that you're eating, and kids are the exact same way. So we have to remember that. So letting them explore the food, letting them help pick out some of their foods. A lot of times we get into this oral aversion, picky eating becomes a very fine line. So I'm not saying let them pick everything they want to eat for dinner, but give them a choice. Say, we have to have a vegetable at dinner, or we're going to have 2 vegetables at dinner. Your choice is green beans or carrots. Which one would you like? So having them help choose some of the foods that they're eating is going to help give them, a sense of autonomy, give them a sense of power, give them a sense of I can do this. Kids are very smart. They're very resilient, especially our kids with, congenital heart defects and other chronic illnesses. They surprise me on a daily basis. So really giving the child the ability, set some boundaries, say, we're having, vegetables at dinner. These are your choices. Which ones are we going to have? And if your child's old enough, get them in the kitchen. Get them to help you. The more that they're experiencing that food and they're seeing how it's being put together, the more likely they might be able to try it and eat it and like it. So that's really, really important, is really getting them involved in this process, especially if they're able to. I mean, even if your child has, severe special needs, if they can rip lettuce, let them rip lettuce. Even if they're not going to eat it, at least they're participating and they're feeling like they're, a strong part of that family. So that's really important. And the other thing is don't give up when your child doesn't like it. You can't give up.
Yeah, that's so easy.
You have
give
to
up.
make
I like
sure.
That.
Yeah, no, don't give up. You have to make sure that you continue to offer those types of foods to them. We know that based off of research, it takes anywhere for 10 to 15 tries for a child to determine if they actually like a food or not. So there's a difference between them being picky and them being orally averse to that texture. And that's where your speech pathologist, your occupational therapist, where they can really come into play and help you determine, is this a picky eating behavior or is this a oral aversion type behavior? And if it's oral aversion, then you know that you can work on those with your therapist as well as at home.
Right. Another thing that we did, I was lucky when my boys were little. We owned a lot of land, and we had a little garden.
Mm-hmm.
And the boys loved to go out in the garden and to help pick the fresh fruits and vegetables and bring them in. And there was such a sense of pride and ownership because I had let them help water them. And I think a lot of times they were happy to try those vegetables or those fruits because, oh my goodness, they came from our garden. So I know a lot of moms with young kids may not have time for a garden, but if you do, even just a small garden, I think that can make a big difference.
Yes, and you can even do potted garden. So you could pick some potted plants and you can grow, tomatoes off of in a potted plant. You can grow, green beans on a potted plant. So, pick one or two things and start with that and see how your kids do with it.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Now, for our older children, how can we help them to make better choices when mom and dad are not around? Like when they go over to a friend's house or the kids go out shopping at the mall or something. There are so many bad choices that are available to them. How can we help them from a young age to start learning how to make healthy choices?
There are so many bad choices, and I think that's where it gets really frustrating for parents is that, you're just bombarded with all of these, unhealthy choices. And I think that it's really going to start when they're younger and talking about how nutrition helps to keep our bodies healthy. Now, for most of these children that have, congenital heart defects or other chronic illnesses, a lot of times their nutrition is part of their medication, and really talking about how nutrition does our body good and we need all of the different food groups. So by starting that early, talking about the importance of vegetables and fruits and lean meats and proteins is really important, as well as dairy so they get their calcium and vitamin D to make their bones strong. So really talking about that and, kind of putting it in their heads at an early age will help them to make better choices when they become older. Now, is that to say that they aren't going to go out and make those choices with their friends? Probably, but we want them to understand that that's not something that we want to do on a regular basis. So if you want to go out and you want to have big, juicy cheeseburger and French fries, that might be okay, but it's not going to be something that we need to do on a weekly basis. So really kind of talking about limits and talking about it's okay to enjoy things in moderation. We just don't want to do it on a regular basis all of the time.
Right. I like that we can have some moderation. It's okay to go do this occasionally. That's definitely how it was with me and my boys, because especially with my firstborn son, who's heart healthy, if I said no, then he really, really wanted it.
Right.
Giving him a little taste of it every now and then was a better idea than completely forbidding him from eating certain foods or certain things. So, and of course, baby brother wanted to do everything big brother wanted to do, and so I had that whole issue to deal with as well. Well, in your blog, you talked about clean eating and healthy living. I really liked your summation that we need to get away from these terms, clean or dirty or bad or whatever, and instead focus on healthy living. That was wonderful.
Oh, so thank you so much.
That was just so perfect. Can you give us some guidelines to help our families who have children with congenital heart defects so that we can have healthy living?
Absolutely. And you said it, clean eating is probably one of my biggest pet peeves, that term. And I think part of that is because just like Danielle was talking about having, a label slapped on you when your child is failure to thrive, a lot of parents get labels slapped on them when they're judged for not feeding their child, quote, clean or good. So I think that the best advice I can give parents is look at your individual situation, look at your child's condition, and go from there. So it may not be, a single mom who's trying her best to feed her child who may have congenital heart defects. Having her, get vegetables on the table at dinner might be a really big step for her, and I think that that's a great thing. So you have to look at each situation individually. But we do know that healthy living, you can make healthy living choices no matter what chronic condition you have or your child has. So first and foremost, half of your plate should be vegetables, and that does not mean they should be swimming in butter, drowning in ranch dressing, or doing the backstroke in, cheese sauce. We want vegetables. Use lots of seasonings, thyme and garlic and pepper and sea salt and those types of things. We want to make sure that we're utilizing all of the great seasonings that we have at our disposal. So half of the plate should be vegetables at lunch and dinner. We want to focus on lean cuts of meat and protein, so chicken and turkey and lean ground beef. You can purchase all of those at a fairly low cost at your supermarkets. You just have to shop your sales, which I think is really important. Might take a little bit more extra time and effort, but you'll definitely get the payoff in the end. And then we want to look and make sure that we're getting enough dairy for our children. Very, very important. If your child has a milk protein allergy, there's other substitutes that we can use, and that's where a registered dietitian can most definitely help plan a great meal plan for you all as far as substituting goes. But that dairy is so important for calcium and vitamin D. And since your children already have congenital heart defects, we don't want to add bone problems to that in the future as well. So really making sure that they're meeting their needs. And again, a registered dietitian can help with that. And the last thing that I would say is physical activity. If you're able, really making sure that your child is getting physical activity on a daily basis. And it doesn't have to be making them go out and ride a bike or walk around the block, although that's fun to do as a whole family. Doing things around the house, picking up their room, vacuuming. How many times do you vacuum and sweat? I hate cleaning my house and sweating like that. That's all physical activity that your children can help you with. So really making sure that they're physically active is going to be so important in living that healthy lifestyle.
I love that. And chores can be a great way for us to get our kids up and moving, even if it's just them helping you take clothes from the dryer and go putting them in their room. Just that, even that activity can be really helpful, and it's teaching them responsibility as well. So it's a multi-purpose activity, which I love to do with my kids too. Well, Kristi, you have been so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
This has been fabulous and a great way to expound on what you said in your blog. So I really appreciate that. Well, it's time for another commercial break, so don't go far. Stay tuned, and we'll have our question and answer portion of our show. You can send in questions for Danielle or Kristi in our blog Talk Radio chat. Right now, the chat room is open, and we actually do have someone in there, so I'm curious to see what they're going to ask us. But stay tuned. We'll be back right after the commercial break.
Anna Jaworski has spoken around the world at congenital heart defect events, and she is available as a keynote or guest speaker for your event. Go to hearttoheartwithanna.com to learn more about booking Anna for your event. You can also find out more about the radio program, keep up to date with CHD resources and information about advocacy groups, as well as read Anna's weekly blog. Anna wants you to stay well connected and participate in the CHD community. Visit hearttoheartwithanna.com today. Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect or CHD community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father, and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more.
Welcome back to our show, Heart to Heart with Anna, a show for the congenital heart defect community. Today we're talking with Heart Mom Danielle Leppo and pediatric dietitian Kristi King. We've heard from Danielle about how a parent can help a baby with a congenital heart defect who has been labeled failure to thrive. And we've also heard from Kristi King about how breast milk can be used and different ways that we can lead a healthy lifestyle so we help our children who are failure to thrive to actually get rid of that label and start to thrive and grow. So I'm very excited by all of the different things that we've talked about. And I know that there are so many families who are dealing with failure to thrive and dealing with oral aversions. So now we'll actually take questions from our listening audience. Waverly, I did get a chance to meet you on Heart Mamas on our Facebook group. So why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about your experience, Waverly?
It started July 8th, 2009 is when he was born. He wasn't diagnosed until 3 weeks later. He was diagnosed with double outlet right ventricle, pulmonary stenosis, and at the time 2 VSD. And so he spent his first 6 weeks in the hospital in the NICU. 2 weeks later, we were back in because he stopped eating. They feed him on demand. Well, they first told me to force feed him every 3 hours, whether or not he was hungry or not. Well, that didn't work because he wouldn't eat. And then they said feed him on demand. Well, he didn't demand, maybe once a day. So that kind of, of course, as any mother would scare anybody. So I was at the hospital saying he's not wanting to eat at all. So we were inpatient, and they labeled him as failure to thrive. And the hospital didn't believe me when I said he's not eating. He doesn't want to eat. So for about 5 days, they said, well, you just need to feed him more. And I kept telling them he doesn't want to eat. So I stopped feeding him and said, if you don't believe me, you feed him. So I made the nurses come in and feed him. Well, it only took 24 hours of that for them to realize that I was not lying. And they said, yes, he is a failure to thrive. He does not want to eat. He hasn't eaten anything. So we ended up with a G-tube. He had that G-tube for a total of 18 months. And we went to occupational therapy. We went to feeding therapy. And we also went to speech therapy and physical therapy. So he was getting all these different kinds of therapies. And for me as a mother, knowing my child, I did not think that they were doing a sufficient job. So he was about 13 months, I guess. I decided to take on the feeding myself. In a matter of just a couple of months, I got him from doing ninja kicks at me if he thought I was coming near his face to fully eating a meal by himself 3 times a day.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, did you use a special program to help you, or was this just Mom's intuition?
I did pretty much what I thought would help him, because if he thought I was coming near his face, he would start fighting me. So I kind of turned it into a game that I would blow kisses on his cheek, kind of like raspberries. Because I remember when he was in the hospital, I would just put my cheek next to his cheek and just do that for 5-10 minutes. And then when I decided to take over all this feeding myself, I would do the same thing. I would blow kisses on his cheek. I would touch his cheek. Whenever he would open his mouth and laugh, I would take my finger and touch his tongue. And I did this repeatedly throughout the day, and then I got a spoon, and I would let him play with a spoon, and then I would take another spoon, and whenever he would laugh, I would touch his tongue with the spoon, and just kind of gradually kept doing stuff. And then it got to where I would put food on his tongue, and then, of course, he would spit it out because he didn't know what it was, and I would keep going from there. I would start giving him kisses on his lips, so that way he knew that he would be familiar with touch.
Right. So it's like you were desensitizing him.
Right. And that was the only way that I could get him to start accepting food. I would put the plate in front of him, and I knew he wouldn't eat it, but I would always sit in front of him, and for an hour I would sit there and eat in front of him, and then he would start getting interested in what I was eating. And anybody who's had kids knows that your kid never wants what's on their plate. They always want what's on your plate.
Yes. So true.
And let me tell you, yes, I have had my fair share of nasty baby food. I did the broccoli and rice. I did the meat puree. I did the green beans. I ate baby food along with my child. So that's a mother's love. right. He wanted to eat it, and that's kind of how we got introduced to food. We tried.
And don't you think that prevents you from giving them stuff that doesn't taste good too? I mean, even if they say it tastes good, if it doesn't taste good, I'm not going to make my baby eat that.
I don't think I found one thing that tasted good in baby food. I tried it all, and I think I found one thing. I think that was some kind of mango fruit puree or something. That was the only thing that I liked.
Yeah, and that's why I ended up pureeing my own food a lot more. And my kids were more interested in the food that I was eating, just like you said. They always want what mom or dad has instead of what they have. And a lot of stuff that comes in those jars, it's not good.
Right. I definitely agree. And then I did that 3 times a day. I sat with my child in his high chair for an hour for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for an hour every day and did that. And after a couple of weeks of doing that, of eating in front of him trying the foods in his own mouth, and then eventually he got to where he wanted to eat. Mm-hmm. And it was just, I think it was, want to say it was like 3 or 4 months of me doing this every day for an hour, 3 times a day. He got to eat. He started to eat. He kind of got the connection. And I got him to eat by mouth just by doing that, by desensitizing him on my own and having him watch me eat.
And making a game out of it in a way. It sounds like you tried to make it fun for him as well and very loving with the kisses.
Right.
So you were having him associate love with what he was eating. I mean, I think that's very sweet that you were letting him know, honey, I love you, and this is why I'm doing this. It wasn't something punitive. It wasn't something that he had done bad or he had done wrong. This was a way of you showing him affection, and I think that's important. Waverly, did you have any questions for Danielle?
No, I don't. Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
I'm real curious. Are you a stay-at-home mom, Danielle?
I actually just returned back to work about 2 months ago, so when she was 20 months old. It was a bit of a struggle to go back because my entire life has been nothing but taking care of her and making sure her needs are met before mine, that sort of thing. I'm really thankful that her dad has a great job and is able to provide. And then I could stay home. So I was thankful for that. But I did make the decision to go back only 15, 20 hours a week. But it does give me some time away and for me to find myself again because that's important as well.
It is important. Mom's sanity and identity of self, and not just being Violet's mom, or in my case, Alex's mom, or in Waverly's case, Turtle's mom. For us to have our own identity, that is so important. And a lot of us do get that from working. I know, like you, after Alex was doing much better, when he was about 2 years old, I decided to go back to the work, but just part-time. Just go into the workforce, and I had my own business. I was selling Pampered Chef at that time. It was kind of nice to get away and talk to people about something other than heart defects or aversions or failure to thrive or problems with motor development. It's nice to have something kind of, I loved my business, but it was trivial compared to the life and death issues that I was facing on a daily basis with my son. So it sounds like for the months that you felt Violet really, really needed you because her situation was so critical, you felt you needed to be there full time. But now that she's doing better, you feel comfortable leaving her for a little while so you can go off and remember who Danielle is.
Yes, and also with that, I only ever leave her with her dad or my mom. Both of you can actually do her tube feeds and everything like that. So I'm comfortable doing that.
Well, and that is something, and we're going to have an episode talking about that. What about daycare? What about babysitters? It's a huge issue for our children with congenital heart defects, and especially our kids who are failure to thrive, because many of them do have G tubes or NG tubes or NJ tubes. And what happens when our kids do start to get a little bit bigger and start pulling those tubes out? You have to get them. But that's the nice thing about the G tube. They can't pull that out. But with the NG tube, they can pull that out. And so, there are certainly issues. And you don't want to leave them with just anybody because other people freak out and don't know how to handle it. We freak out too, but only until they've done it a couple of times, and then it becomes old hat, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. I'm like a pro now.
It's amazing how they can get those little fingers around those tubes and pull them out of their noses, isn't it?
Yes, and she's pulled out her G-tube, I'd say 3 or 4 times, too.
She has pulled that out, even though that's surgically put in there? Oh, my gosh.
Yes,
that must be so scary.
The first time she did it, it was, but there's like a water-filled balloon on the other side of the tube that's in her stomach, so it prevents it from being pulled out all the time. It keeps it secure. But sometimes you get a defective balloon and it doesn't hold the water in, and you don't realize until a week later, and then they pull it out, and you just have to quickly replace it.
Life is never boring with a kid with a congenital heart defect. Have you had that too, Waverly? Oh, my gosh.
Whenever Turtle was born, he had an NG tube in for his first 6 weeks in the hospital. Every single day, no matter how far they taped it, around his ear or up high or down low, he managed to get his little fingers into his NG tube and pull out his tube every single day he was in the hospital.
Oh, my gosh.
And his G-tube.
Can do that.
Yeah, and his G-tube. We've had our fair share of that being pulled out. I can't tell you how many he's pulled out. And there was one we actually had to go to the ER because we didn't know how long it had been since he pulled it out.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't even know. I thought since they were surgically implanted, they couldn't pull them out. These little kids, it's amazing what they can do to undo the things that we spend so much time and money putting into their bodies. So does it bleed? Do you have to worry about infection when they pull them out?
Well, the stomach wall is placed next to the abdomen during the surgery, and the little G-tube, what we had, it looks like a little pin on the inside, and then you put it in the stomach, and then you put saline water into the little balloon, and it blows up inside the stomach. And Turtle has actually ripped that whole thing out with the balloon still inflated.
Oh, my gosh.
I don't know how he did it, but he's pulled it out. And we would have to deflate it, pop it back in his stomach, and blow it back up.
Waverly, it's a good thing you were able to get him off of his G-tube. If anybody sounds like he needed to be off of the G-tube, I think it's Turtle. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
you girls, I think you girls deserve stars for everything that you've done to help your babies.
Yeah, it's been wild.
Well, failure to thrive is a scary diagnosis. So before we go, I would like to ask each of you ladies if you can give just one tip to another family who is dealing with that failure to thrive diagnosis. And I know, Danielle, you already did an excellent one, but I'm going to put you in a hot seat and make you think about one more. One more tip that you would share with parents to help them get through this diagnosis and this period in their lives where they're dealing with a child who has a heart defect and has failure to thrive and oral aversions. And I'll let you start, Waverly, so I can give Danielle an extra minute to think what she's going to say.
I would introduce her to Turtle. That's what I would do.
That's great. Okay.
For a lot of reasons, not only because he was born with CHD, he was also labeled failure to thrive. And if you would see my son, he's going to be 5 next month, and he's a very hefty 75 pounds. Now, he is one of those rare, chunky heart babies. But if you would have seen him 2 years ago, he couldn't break 21 pounds.
Wow.
I would want others to know as well. They're resilient. Give them a chance. Help them out as much as you can. Give them everything you can and let them blossom.
See, perfect. You did a great job with that, Waverly, even though I put you on the spot. Okay, Danielle, now it's your turn to be in a hot seat.
Okay,
what would you tell a mom who has had a child just diagnosed as failure to thrive?
My advice is that slow and steady wins the race. I know that sounds extremely cliche, but it's very true. These feeding issues will not go away overnight, and you have to work at it. And just give them time. You know your child better than anyone else. Read their cues. If they're ready for something, they will do it. If not, try again in another week or two. It's not a race to the finish. It's a nice big marathon is what I like to call it.
Yes, it's not a race, and it's also not a competition. Just because Turtle was able to get off of his G-tube in a certain amount of time doesn't mean everybody will, but it's something to shoot for, and it's something to hope for. And that's the whole theme of Heart to Heart with Anna for Season 2 is that there is hope. I think Turtle and Violet have given us beautiful examples of the fact that there is hope even when you're dealing with failure to thrive. And I love that, Danielle. You're right. Slow and steady. Take each child where that child is. Some kids will just move like gangbusters, but most of our kids, it's going to be a long, arduous task. And I love how Waverly shared how 3 times a day, every day, she was very, very consistent. She did the same thing over and over, and then she would make it a little bit more complex. She would do a little bit something different with the desensitization just to move towards the ultimate goal of eating by themselves. My friends, there is hope, and that does conclude this episode of Heart to Heart with Anna. Please come back next week when we will be having our show again, noon Eastern Time, and our topic will be dealing with long hospital stays. Until then, please find and like us on Facebook. Check out our website, hearttoheartwithanna.com, and our Cafe Press Boutique, which there's a link to that from the website. And remember, my friends, there is hope.
It's fall. Time to gear up and get ready at Cabela's Ultimate Outfitter Sale. Save $25 on IMI 223 and 556 bulk ammo. And get 30% off select Muck rubber boots. Take $40 off a Big Game Guardian XL 2-man ladder stand. And $100 to $150 off select Vortex Viper rifle scopes. Plus, order your next firearm online at Cabela's.com and we'll ship it to your nearest Cabela's for free. Come to Cabela's Ultimate Outfitter Sale, in-store and online at Cabela's.com.